The chamber stretched so high that its ceiling disappeared into darkness. 47 species had built this place together, each adding their own touch to the massive hall. Crystal pillars from the Vexcar homeworld caught light and split it into rainbows. Mindari thought sculptures floated in the air, shifting colors based on the emotions in the room. The Keithrel had installed gravity platforms that let their massive bodies hover without crushing the floor. Ambassador Elena Kovac stood in the center of it all. Feeling very small, she represented humanity. All 8 billion people back on Earth and the 3 million scattered across Mars, Luna, and the Belt colonies. Her species had discovered faster-than-light travel only 5 years ago. 5 years. Most of the species in this chamber had been traveling the stars for thousands of years, before humans even invented the wheel. The Vexcar overseer spoke first. Its body was made of living crystal and its voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Humanity, you have been summoned to receive the terms of your integration into galactic society. Elena had expected a negotiation. She had prepared arguments, compromises, trade agreements. Instead, the word terms hit her like cold water. The Council has reviewed your species' history, the overseer continued. What we have found concerns us greatly. Images appeared in the air above Elena's head. She recognized them immediately and wished she didn't. Wars. Thousands of years of human wars. The footage showed atomic bombs falling on cities, trenches filled with bodies, concentration camps, chemical weapons burning through villages. In your last 300 years alone, a Mindari representative said, its telepathic voice echoing directly in Elena's mind. Your species has killed over 200 million of its own kind. You have weaponized diseases. You have poisoned your own planet. You achieved nuclear fission and immediately used it to destroy cities. Elena wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that humanity had also created art, music, literature, that they had overcome so much, learned from their mistakes, built a unified world government specifically to prevent future wars. But the images kept playing and her words died in her throat. The Keithrel ambassador spoke next, its voice so deep that Elena felt it in her chest. Younger species often go through violent phases. This is understood. But humanity developed too quickly. You went from pre-industrial society to faster-than-light travel in only 300 years. Most species take 3,000. We are concerned, the overseer said, that your capacity for violence has not had time to mature into wisdom. Elena found her voice. With respect, every species in this chamber has a violent past. The Vexcar had the crystalline crusades. The Mindari fought the thought wars for 6 centuries. Even the Keithrel. Exactly, the overseer interrupted. We know what unchecked aggression can do. We know because we have lived through it and learned from it. The Council exists to prevent another species from making the same mistakes on a galactic scale. A hologram appeared before Elena. It showed a contract, hundreds of pages long, written in 47 different languages including English. These are the terms of humanity's integration, the overseer said. You will accept them, or you will be isolated from galactic society until such time as you demonstrate sufficient maturity. Elena scrolled through the document, her heart sinking with each page. The terms were not suggestions. They were commands. Humanity could maintain no military vessels outside the Sol system. Every colony ship required Council approval. Research into certain technologies was forbidden. Antimatter weapons, artificial intelligence with military applications, singularity manipulation, temporal mechanics, biological weapons, nanoscale weaponry. The list went on for pages. Worse, the Council would station peacekeeping forces throughout human space. They called them observers, but Elena could read between the lines. They were occupiers there to make sure humanity followed the rules. These terms are unacceptable, Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. You're asking us to stop advancing, to stop exploring, to accept permanent second-class status in the galaxy. We are asking you to accept guidance, the Mindari representative said, its mental voice somehow both gentle and condescending. Think of the Council as teachers. We will help humanity mature. And if we refuse? The chamber fell silent. The overseer's crystalline body caught the light in a way that made it look sharp, dangerous. Then humanity will be quarantined. No other species will trade with you. No one will share technology. You will remain in your system, watching the galaxy move forward without you until you accept reality. Elena looked around the chamber. 47 species, some barely humanoid, some utterly alien. all of them watching her with expressions she struggled to read. Pity? Contempt? Fear? She realized then what this really was. The council wasn't afraid of what humanity had done. They were afraid of what humanity might become. I need to consult with my government, Elena said. You have one standard week, the overseer replied. Return with your answer. Elena left the chamber, her security detail falling in around her. They were all human, all former military, all trying very hard not to show how angry they were. She didn't speak until they reached the shuttle bay. Get me a secure line to Earth, she said. Priority 1. I need to speak with the Secretary General immediately. The conversation with Earth took 6 hours once she factored in the light speed delay. She explained the terms. She explained the implicit threat. She tried to present options, but there weren't many. What do you recommend? Secretary General Okonkwo asked over the video link. Elena stared at the contract on her datapad. Sir, if we accept these terms, we give up our sovereignty. We become children in a galaxy of adults, and we stay that way forever. But if we refuse, we're alone. Completely alone. Can we negotiate? I tried. They're not interested. Okonkwo was silent for a long moment. Elena could see him aging in real time, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Come home, he finally said. We'll discuss this with the full assembly. But Elena, start preparing for the possibility that we'll have to accept. Elena returned to the council chambers 1 week later. The 47 species waited, patient as stones. Humanity has considered your terms, Elena said. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. We acknowledge your concerns. We understand your desire for galactic peace. The overseer leaned forward slightly. A gesture Elena had learned meant satisfaction. However, Elena continued, we believe there are points that require further discussion. The restrictions on colonization, for instance, seem overly broad, and the presence of peacekeepers in our space. Ambassador Kovac, the overseer interrupted. You misunderstand. These are not negotiations. These are terms. Accept or reject. There is no middle ground. Elena felt something break inside her, not her spirit, but her last illusion that the council saw humanity as equals. Then I need one final consultation with my government, she said. You have had a week. Please, just one more day. The council conferred among themselves, voices and thoughts mixing in languages Elena couldn't understand. Finally, the overseer nodded one day. Then we require your answer. That night, Elena sat in her quarters aboard the human diplomatic vessel. She didn't sleep. Instead, she read through human history, the real history, not the edited version the council had shown. She read about humans who had been conquered and occupied throughout history. She read about how they had responded. Sometimes they had submitted. Sometimes they had resisted. Sometimes they had waited, bided their time, and emerged stronger than before. She thought about a conversation she'd had with her grandmother years ago. Her grandmother had lived through the last great crisis before unification, when 3 nuclear powers had stood on the brink of war. The thing about humans, her grandmother had said, is that we're stubborn. Tell us we can't do something and we'll find a way to do it just to prove you wrong. Elena opened a secure channel to Earth, not to the Secretary General this time, but to someone else, someone who would understand what she was about to propose. The next day, she returned to the council chambers. The 47 species waited. The overseer's crystalline body reflected the light and patterns that Elena now recognized as anticipation. Humanity has reached a decision, Elena said. And, Elena took a breath. She thought about Earth, about the 8 billion people counting on her. She thought about the future, about what humanity could become if given the chance. She thought about her grandmother's words. Humanity acknowledges the council's terms, she said carefully. The chamber seemed to relax. Several species made gestures of approval. Elena continued, her voice clear and steady. We acknowledge that you have made your position clear. We have transmitted your terms to Earth, and they have been received and understood by the appropriate authorities. The overseer made a sound like chimes celebrating. Then humanity accepts. We acknowledge your terms, Elena repeated, emphasizing the word carefully. That is all I am authorized to say at this time. Humanity will now conduct internal consultations regarding our future relationship with the galactic community. The overseer's crystalline body shifted, colors darkening. That is not an answer. That is the only answer I am authorized to provide, Elena said. Thank you for your time and consideration. Earth will be in touch. She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, the chamber erupted in confused voices and thoughts. She heard the overseer calling her back, demanding clarity. She kept walking. Her security detail met her at the door, and they moved quickly toward the shuttle bay. One of them, a former Marine named Rodriguez, spoke quietly as they walked. Ma'am, that wasn't exactly a yes or no. No, Elena agreed. It wasn't. They're going to be pissed. Yes, they are. They reached the shuttle and sealed the door behind them. As they lifted off from the council station, Elena watched it shrink in the viewport. Somewhere in that massive structure, 47 species were probably arguing about what humanity's response had actually meant. Let them argue, Elena thought. The shuttle jumped to FTL, and the council station vanished into the unreality of faster-than-light space. Elena pulled up her datapad and began composing a message to Earth, encrypted with the highest-level security protocols. Phase 1 complete, she wrote. They believe we are considering compliance. Recommend we proceed to Phase 2, the silence. She attached a document she had been working on for the past week. A plan. A desperate, dangerous, audacious plan that would either save humanity or doom them. The plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. If the Council wouldn't let humanity advance under their watch, then humanity would advance where they couldn't watch. If the Council wanted to treat humans like children, then humans would do what children do when their parents aren't looking. They would grow up in secret. Elena sent the message and sat back in her seat. Through the viewport, she could see stars streaking past in the impossible colors of FTL space. Somewhere out there, humanity's future waited. The Council had made their position clear. Now humanity would make theirs. The galaxy was about to learn something that countless conquerors, dictators, and would-be masters had learned throughout human history. You could try to cage humanity, restrict them, control them. But you couldn't stop them from finding a way around you. The silence was about to begin. 50 years had passed since humanity went quiet. Ambassador Thane stood in his private office aboard the Council's central station, reviewing reports that made less sense the more he read them. He was Cathrel, one of the oldest species in the Council, and in his 4 centuries of life, he had never encountered anything quite like the human situation. After Elena Kovac had delivered her cryptic non-answer and returned to Earth, the Council had waited. They expected humanity to either accept the terms or formally reject them. Instead, humanity had done something no species had done before. They had simply stopped talking. All human colonies went dark within a month. Not destroyed, not abandoned, just silent. Council attempts to establish communication were met with automated responses. Message received. Earth is currently conducting internal policy reviews. We will contact you when ready. That was 50 years ago. The first decade, the Council had been patient. They assumed humanity was having internal debates, working through the political process of accepting the inevitable. The second decade, they became concerned. The third decade, they sent investigation teams. None of them came back. Thane pulled up the latest report on his holographic display. The CSS Explorer, a Council science vessel with a crew of 43 representing 12 different species, had been sent to the edge of human space 2 months ago. Their mission was simple: observe and report. Don't engage, don't enter human systems, just watch and send back data. The ship's last transmission had come from the border of the quarantine zone. Detecting unusual energy signatures, moving to investigate, then nothing. No distress call, no debris field, no wreckage. The ship and everyone on it had simply vanished. It was the third Council vessel to disappear in human space this year. Thane's office door chimed, and he called for entry. Overseer Caxlin entered, their crystalline body somehow looking more rigid than usual. The Vexcar leader had been in charge during the original ultimatum to humanity, and they had not aged well with the uncertainty. Have you reviewed the intelligence reports? Caxlin asked without preamble. I have. Then you understand we cannot continue this way. 3 ships lost. No communication. No explanation. The humans are violating their quarantine and we have no idea what they're doing. Thane gestured for Caxlin to take a seat, but the Overseer remained standing. Thane sighed and pulled up a star map. It showed Council space in blue with human territory marked in gray at one edge. Look at this, Thane said. Human space 50 years ago. One system, Sol. 3 inhabited planets, a few outposts. Simple, contained, easy to monitor. He adjusted the map, overlaying new data. This is what our long-range sensors detect now. Energy signatures consistent with human fusion reactors. We've detected them in over 200 systems. Caxelin's crystalline structure sharpened, a sign of agitation. 200? That's impossible. We've been monitoring all the jump routes. We would have seen colony ships. We didn't see them because we were looking in the wrong places, Thane said. He zoomed the map to show vast areas of space between established trade routes. The humans didn't use Council jump routes. They went through nebulae we considered too dangerous to navigate. They sent generation ships through normal space, trips that would take decades. They found routes we never bothered to explore because they took too long or were too risky. Insanity, Caxelin said. Generation ships? Do they have any idea how many people would die on such voyages? Humans have always been willing to sacrifice for expansion, Thane said quietly. It's in their nature. They sent out hundreds of colony ships before the quarantine. Many probably died, but some made it. And those colonies have been growing in silence. Caxelin moved to the window, looking out at the stars. What else do we know? Thane pulled up more reports, his expression growing darker with each one. Refugees from independent colonies near human space report strange sightings. They call them steel stars that move through the dark. Our analysts think they're human ships, but unlike anything we have on record. The descriptions are consistent, massive, geometric, completely silent. Weapon systems? Unknown. Anyone who gets close enough to find out doesn't come back. Caxelin turned from the window. I'm calling for a council vote. We gave humanity their chance. They chose isolation. Now they're expanding in violation of galactic law and making our ships disappear. We must act. And do what exactly? Thane asked. Attack them? We don't even know what we'd be attacking. Then we send a larger fleet, a military fleet, properly armed and supported. We go into human space, we assess their capabilities, and we enforce the quarantine we should have enforced 50 years ago. Thane felt something he had not felt in centuries. Genuine fear. Overseer, think about this carefully. The humans have had 50 years of isolation. 50 years without our restrictions, without our guidance. What if they've been preparing? Preparing for what? For us. Caxelin made a sound like breaking glass, the Vexcar equivalent of dismissive laughter. They're one species, and a young one at that. We are 47 species with thousands of years of technological development. Whatever they've built, we can handle it. Can we? Thane pulled up historical records. Do you remember the humans' first contact with us? They achieved FTL travel without any outside help. They developed it independently, something only 6 other species in Council history have done. They went from pre-industrial to spacefaring in 3 centuries. They learn faster than any species on record, which is exactly why we must act now before they become a greater threat. The Council convened in full session 3 days later. All 47 species gathered, their representatives filling the massive chamber. Thane watched as Overseer Caxelin presented the case for military intervention. The holographic displays showed everything. The missing ships, the unauthorized colonies, the energy signatures suggesting human expansion far beyond what should have been possible, the mysterious steel stars that patrolled human space like silent guardians. The humans have broken the quarantine, Caxelin declared. They have expanded without permission. They have made our vessels disappear without explanation. We gave them terms. They ignored us. Now we must act. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some species argued for immediate action. The Vexcar and their allies wanted a show of force, a fleet large enough to overwhelm any resistance and enforce Council authority once and for all. Others urged caution. The Mindari representative, a being whose telepathic abilities let it sense emotions across vast distances, spoke carefully. I sense nothing from human space. No fear, no aggression, no emotion at all. It's as if they've built a wall around their thoughts. This troubles me more than hostility would, because they have something to hide, Caxelin countered. Thane waited until the arguments had cycled through the usual positions, then stood to speak. The chamber quieted. He was one of the oldest members, and his words carried weight. I voted for the human quarantine 50 years ago, he said. I believed then, as many of you did, that humanity needed guidance, that their rapid advancement was dangerous. I still believe I was right to be concerned. He paused, letting that sink in. But I believe we made a critical error. We treated the humans like children who needed to be controlled. We didn't consider that children, when restricted, don't stop growing. They just grow where you can't see them. Then you agree we must intervene, Caxlan said. I agree we must do something, Thane replied. But I urge caution. We don't know what we're dealing with. Sending a fleet into unknown territory against an opponent who has had 50 years to prepare, who makes our ships disappear without a trace, who expands through space we consider impassable, this seems unwise. What do you suggest? Another representative asked. That we do nothing? I suggest we try talking to them again. Send a diplomatic mission, not a military fleet. Find out what they want, what they've become. Give them a chance to explain themselves. Caxlan's crystalline body flashed with colors that suggested barely controlled anger. They've had 50 years to explain themselves. They chose silence. Now we choose action. The vote was called. Thane voted against military intervention, along with a handful of other species who shared his concerns. But the majority wanted answers, and they wanted them now. The motion passed. The Council would assemble a fleet and enter human space, not a small fleet, not an exploratory mission. A demonstration fleet, the largest gathering of military power in modern Council history. 10,000 warships from a dozen species, enough firepower to overwhelm any defense, enough presence to make the Council's authority absolutely clear. They would jump into human space at a system called Terra's Edge, a symbolic location, the farthest colony humanity had established before the quarantine. They would demand answers. They would enforce Council law. Thane returned to his office after the vote, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down on him. He pulled up the star maps again, studying the scattered energy signatures that marked human expansion. 200 systems, possibly more that they hadn't detected. 50 years of silence. 50 years of building something in the dark. He thought about human history, the files he'd reviewed before voting for the quarantine. Humans had a pattern. When pushed, they pushed back. When cornered, they fought. When told they couldn't do something, they found a way to do it anyway. The Council fleet would gather in 6 months and then jump into human space. Thane hoped desperately that they weren't about to make the biggest mistake in Council history. He recorded a private message, encrypted and secured, addressed to his family back on the Kathrel homeworld. If you're receiving this, it means something has gone wrong. The Council is about to confront humanity, and I fear we don't understand what we're confronting. We treated them like primitive children. We forgot that even children grow teeth. He paused, trying to find words for the dread he felt. There's an old human saying I discovered while researching their history. Let sleeping dogs lie. I fear we're about to kick a dog that's been sleeping for 50 years, growing bigger and stronger in the dark. And I fear we won't like what wakes up. He sent the message and returned to the window. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness of space, humanity waited. The silence that had lasted 50 years was about to break. Thane just hoped the galaxy would survive what came next. Fleet Admiral Zentar stood on the bridge of the CSS Absolute Authority, the flagship of the largest military fleet ever assembled by the Council. Around him, holographic displays showed 10,000 warships arranged in perfect formation, representing 12 species and thousands of years of combined military experience. He was Vexkar, like Overseer Caxlan, and his crystalline body pulsed with colors that indicated confidence and determination. This was not his first military operation. He had commanded peacekeeping forces during the Fringe Rebellions and had overseen the integration of 3 new species into the Council. He knew how to project power, but as he looked at the display showing the jump coordinates for Terra's Edge, he felt something unusual. A faint vibration in his crystalline structure that might have been doubt. All ships report ready for jump, his tactical officer announced. She was Mindari, her telepathic abilities perfectly suited for coordinating such a massive fleet. Final weapons check, Zentar ordered. The displays updated, showing the massive firepower at his command. Energy weapons that could melt through planetary crust, kinetic accelerators that could punch holes through asteroids, missile systems carrying warheads powerful enough to crack moons, shield technology that could withstand direct hits from anything short of a supernova. Against this force, no single species could stand. That was the point. All weapon systems optimal, the tactical officer reported. Admiral, I must note, I'm detecting unusual neural patterns from the crew. Anxiety levels are elevated. That's normal before a major operation, Zentar said. With respect, sir, this is different. It's almost as if, she paused, as if they sense something we cannot see. Zentar dismissed the concern. Mindari were sometimes too sensitive to emotions. Fear before battle was expected. All ships prepare to jump on my mark, he announced across the fleet-wide channel. Remember, our mission is to demonstrate Council authority and assess human capabilities. We are not here to start a war unless forced to do so. Hold fire unless fired upon. He took one last look at the tactical display. 10,000 ships, the combined might of the Council. Execute jump, space twisted, and the fleet vanished from Council space. For 3 seconds they existed in the unreality of faster-than-light travel, where normal physics took a holiday and ships moved between stars and heartbeats. Then they emerged at Terra's edge. Centaur's first thought was that something had gone wrong with the jump. The system was supposed to contain a small human colony, maybe a few dozen civilian vessels, perhaps some basic defense platforms. Instead, his sensors showed nothing. Empty space, a yellow sun, 3 planets, and complete silence. Scan for the colony, Zentar ordered. Scanning, sir. I'm detecting... Wait. The tactical officer's mental voice changed, taking on an edge of confusion. Sir, the colony is there. On the 2nd planet. But I'm reading population at 0. 0? You mean they evacuated? No, sir. The colony structures are intact. Power readings are normal. But there are no life signs. It's as if everyone just left. Zentar felt that vibration in his structure again. Stronger now. Expand scan to the full system. Find me those humans. The fleet's sensors, thousands of them working in concert, swept through the system. They found 3 abandoned mining stations. They found orbital platforms empty but operational. They found satellite networks still broadcasting, still recording, still sending data to receivers that no longer had anyone watching them. But no humans. No ships, no defenses, sir, the tactical officer said. And now her mental voice carried something Zentar had never heard from her before. Terror. Sensors are detecting spatial distortions throughout the system. Multiple distortions. Hundreds of them. What kind of distortions? Unknown. They're appearing all around us. Sir, I think... Space tore open. That was the only way Zentar could describe it later. Space itself seemed to rip apart like fabric, and through those rips came ships that should not exist. They were not ships in the traditional sense. They were geometric nightmares, structures that hurt to look at because they bent light in ways that made his crystalline eyes ache. Some were perfect spheres covered in moving surfaces. Others were angular constructs that seemed to have more sides than 3-dimensional space should allow. Still others appeared to be nothing but frameworks, empty spaces held together by threads of light. And there were thousands of them. Battle stations, Zentar ordered. All ships, defensive formation. The Council fleet moved quickly, their training taking over. 10,000 warships arranged themselves into layered defensive spheres. Point defense systems coming online. Weapons charging. The human fleet, if it could be called a fleet, simply waited. They surrounded the Council forces completely, maintaining perfect spacing, their weapon systems dark. Waiting. Hail them, Zentar ordered. Communications attempts are being absorbed, sir. It's as if the signals enter their ships and simply stop existing. Fire a warning shot. Single energy beam, no target, just a demonstration. One of the Council ships fired. A bright lance of energy, enough to vaporize a building, shot toward the nearest human vessel. The beam hit the ship and disappeared. No shield flare, no impact flash, no reaction at all. The energy simply ceased to exist. What in the depths of space? Zentar whispered. Then the human fleet attacked. Except attacked was the wrong word. What happened next was not a battle. It was a demonstration. The human ships didn't fire weapons. Instead, space itself became a weapon. Council ships suddenly found their navigation systems reporting impossible readings. Up became down. Forward became backward. Gravity wells appeared from nowhere, pulling ships off course, dragging them toward each other like leaves in a whirlpool. Zentar watched in horror as his carefully ordered formation fell apart. Ships designed to fight together found themselves separated, disoriented, their sensors reporting contradictory data that made coordinated action impossible. Return fire, he ordered. All ships, engage the enemy. The Council fleet opened up with everything they had. Thousands of energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, missiles, the combined firepower of a dozen species unleashed in coordinated volleys that should have overwhelmed any defense. The human ships absorbed it all. Energy weapons hit their hulls and vanished. Kinetic projectiles struck and simply stopped, hanging in space for a moment before falling away. Missiles detonated against shields that didn't glow, didn't flash, didn't react at all. Then the human ships began to move. They didn't accelerate. They didn't turn. They simply transitioned from one position to another, as if the space between point A and point B was optional. One moment a human ship was kilometers away, the next it was right next to a council vessel. That's when Zentar saw the swarms. Clouds of something emerged from the human ships. At first he thought they were fighters, but they were too small. Then he thought they were missiles, but they moved wrong. They flowed like liquid metal, splitting and reforming, surrounding council ships in glittering clouds. "Sir, the swarms are making contact with our vessels," the tactical officer reported, her mental voice shaking. They're eating the shields. Molecular dissolution. They're taking our ships apart atom by atom. Evasive action. All ships, emergency jump out of the system. But the council ships couldn't jump. Their FTL drives were being disrupted by something in the space around them. Some field the human ships were generating that made faster-than-light travel impossible. They were trapped. One by one, council ships went dark. Not destroyed, disabled. The swarms would engulf a vessel, strip away its shields, then somehow shut down all its systems without breaching the hull. Life support remained active. The crew survived. But the ship became nothing more than a drifting hulk. Centaur watched his fleet being systematically dismantled with surgical precision. No casualties, no deaths, just perfect methodical disabling of every ship. Then the communication blackout ended. A voice came through on all channels simultaneously, speaking perfect galactic standard. "Council forces, cease fire. We do not wish to destroy you." Zentar looked at his tactical display. Half his fleet was already disabled. The other half was holding formation around the absolute authority. But their weapons had proven useless. "This is Fleet Admiral Zentar of the Galactic Council. Identify yourself." "I am Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Fleet. You have entered human space with hostile intent. Explain yourself." "We came to enforce Council authority and assess—" "You came to threaten us," Chen interrupted. "You came with 10,000 warships because you were afraid of what we might have become." "You were right to be afraid, Admiral, but not for the reasons you think." Another human ship appeared, this one different from the others. It was larger, more angular, covered in what looked like hexagonal panels that shifted and moved like living scales. The name on its hull was written in English, Defiant Silence. "We spent 50 years in isolation," Chen continued. 50 years without the Council telling us what we could or couldn't research, what we could or couldn't build, what we could or couldn't become. Would you like to see what we built?" "We can see it," Zentar said bitterly. "You've made your point." "Have I?" "Your fleet is still combat capable. Half your ships can still fight. Your weapons are still charged. You're wondering if you can still win this." Zentar said nothing. She was right. "Let me remove all doubt," Chen said. The human ships changed. The panels on their hulls opened, revealing interiors that glowed with light that hurt to look at. From those openings came weapons that Zentar recognized from theoretical physics papers, but had never seen built. Gravity lances that could compress matter into neutron density. Causality disruptors that could make effects precede causes. Temporal field generators that could slow or speed up time itself in localized areas. And at the center of the Defiant Silence's hull, a dark sphere that seemed to eat light. A contained singularity. A black hole small enough to carry but powerful enough to delete matter from existence. "These are the weapons we chose not to use," Chen said quietly. "These are the technologies your council forbade us from researching. We built them anyway, not because we wanted to threaten you, but because we wanted to make sure no one could ever threaten us again." The remaining council ships held their positions, but Zentar could see their shield frequencies fluctuating. Crews were afraid. They had come here expecting to overawe a primitive species, and instead they had found something that made their most advanced technology look like children's toys. "What do you want?" Zentar asked. "What we've always wanted. To be left alone to develop as we see fit." to explore space on our own terms, to not have our progress limited by someone else's fear. And if the Council refuses, then we'll continue to expand in the dark and you'll spend the next 1,000 years wondering where we are and what we're building. Every unexplained sensor reading will be us. Every ship that goes missing will be our fault. Every shadow in space will be a human vessel you can't see. Chen paused, letting that sink in. Or you can accept that humanity is no longer the species you tried to cage 50 years ago. We've grown up, Admiral. The question is whether the Council is mature enough to deal with us as equals. Zentar looked at his tactical display. His fleet was defeated, even if most of the ships were still technically functional. The humans had proven they could disable or destroy every vessel he commanded, and they had done it while barely trying. I will relay your message to the Council, he said finally. Good. You have 6 hours to evacuate this system. After that, human defense networks will activate and we cannot guarantee your safety. 6 hours? That's barely enough time to... Then you should start now. The human ships vanished as quickly as they had appeared, space folding around them and pulling them away. But Zentar knew they were still there, watching, waiting to see if the Council would accept this humiliation or try to fight. He gave the order to withdraw. Ships that were still mobile helped tow the disabled vessels. The fleet limped back to the jump point, and one by one they began the journey back to Council space. Zentar stood on his bridge, his crystalline body dark with the colors of defeat, and tried to compose a report that would explain to the Council how 10,000 warships had been defeated in 12 minutes by a species they had thought they could control. The sky of Terra's edge had fallen silent, and in that silence the galaxy had changed forever. The Council chambers had never been this loud. Ambassador Thane sat in his designated platform, watching 47 species argue with a ferocity he had not witnessed in centuries. His earlier fear had been proven correct, but there was no satisfaction in being right. Only dread about what would come next. Fleet Admiral Zentar stood in the center of the chamber, his crystalline body dim with shame, as holographic recordings played above his head. The Council members watched the Battle of Terra's Edge over and over, seeing their mighty fleet taken apart like a training exercise. 12 minutes, Overseer Caxlin said, their voice sharp enough to cut crystal. Our largest fleet in modern history defeated in 12 minutes. How is this possible? The humans have developed technologies we don't understand, Zentar replied. Weapons that violate known physics, ships that move without acceleration, swarms that disassemble matter at the molecular level, and those were just their defensive systems. A Mindari counselor spoke, their telepathic voice carrying horror. I reviewed the sensor logs. Those weapons they revealed at the end, the singularity devices, the temporal disruptors, they weren't bluffing. The energy signatures were real. If they had chosen to use them, our fleet would have been annihilated, Zentar finished. They could have killed us all. They chose not to. Mercy or manipulation? A counselor from the Dreth species asked. Did they spare us out of compassion or because they want us afraid? Does it matter? Thane spoke up. The result is the same. We attempted to enforce our authority and we failed. Completely. The chamber erupted again. Some species wanted immediate escalation. Gather every ship, every weapon, every asset the Council had, and launch a war of extermination before humanity became even more dangerous. Others advocated for negotiation, arguing that the humans' restraint suggested they didn't want war. A smaller faction, led by the Dreth, wanted complete withdrawal. Close the borders, establish defensive lines, and let humanity have whatever space they wanted as long as they stayed away from Council territory. Overseer Caxlin called for order, their crystalline body flashing with authority. We must decide our course of action, but first we need more intelligence. What exactly have the humans built in their 50 years of silence? An intelligence officer stepped forward, projecting new holographic data. The images showed star systems, energy signatures, and estimates that made Thane's aged heart sink. Based on our analysis, humanity has colonized approximately 300 systems. Not the 200 we initially estimated. 300. They used methods we never anticipated. Generation ships launched before the quarantine, sleeper colonies hidden in dangerous nebulae, and routes through space we considered impassable. The display changed, showing massive structures in orbit around distant stars. We've detected what appear to be Dyson swarms around 7 stars, partial shells designed to harvest stellar energy. The power output from these structures is, the officer paused, approximately 1,000 times the total energy production of all council space combined. The chamber fell silent. That much power meant the humans could build, research, and expand on a scale that made the council's collective efforts look insignificant. What are they using that power for? Someone asked. Unknown. But we've detected 3 non-council species in regular contact with human colonies. It appears humanity has formed alliances outside our awareness. Which species? Caxlin demanded. The Kresh, the Wanderers, and the Silent Ones. All 3 are minor civilizations we considered too primitive to engage with. The humans apparently disagreed. Thane absorbed this information with growing concern. The humans weren't just building weapons. They were building an alternative to the Council itself. A new power block that operated by different rules. What about their military capabilities? A counselor asked. We saw what they used at Terra's Edge. Is that the extent of their forces? The intelligence officer looked uncomfortable. Sir, the vessels at Terra's Edge represented approximately 3% of detected human military assets. We estimate they have at least 100,000 combat-capable ships, though the exact number is unclear, because their vessels use stealth technology we cannot penetrate. 100,000 ships, 10 times what the Council had brought to Terra's Edge, and every one of them apparently more advanced than anything the Council had. We also detected something else, the officer continued. Extensive AI integration. Their ships appear to be semi-autonomous, capable of making tactical decisions without direct human control. They've violated the prohibition on military AI completely. And they've made it work, Thane observed. The AI protocols we abandoned because they were too dangerous, the humans mastered them. Caxlin turned to face the assembly. We have a decision to make. Humanity has violated every restriction we placed on them. They've developed forbidden technologies, expanded without permission, and built a military force that rivals our own. We have 3 options. The Overseer projected 3 paths on the main display. Option 1, total war. We mobilize every asset, every species, every weapon system we possess. We use our own forbidden technologies if necessary. We eliminate the human threat before they grow strong enough to threaten the entire galaxy. Several counselors nodded. The Vexcar and their closest allies looked eager for this option. Option 2, negotiation. We open formal diplomatic channels, acknowledge humanity as an equal power, and attempt to reach an accommodation. We accept that we cannot control them and try to coexist peacefully. The Mindari and several other species seem to favor this path. Option 3, isolation. We close our borders to human space, establish defensive perimeters, and prepare for the possibility of future conflict while hoping it never comes. We let them have their territory and focus on protecting our own. The Dreth delegation and some of the smaller species leaned toward this option. I call for debate, Caxlin said. Each faction may present arguments. The next hours were brutal. Species that had cooperated for millennia found themselves at odds over fundamental questions about power, security, and the future of galactic civilization. The war faction argued passionately. They showed simulations of what might happen if humanity continued advancing unchecked. In 10 years, they might have weapons that could crack planets. In 50 years, they might be able to destroy stars. In a century, they could be unstoppable. We must act now, a Vexcar general insisted. Yes, we will take casualties. Yes, it will be costly. But better to fight them now while we still can than to wait until they're so powerful that resistance is impossible. The negotiation faction countered with different logic. They pointed to humanity's restraint at Terra's Edge, their willingness to spare the Council fleet when they could have destroyed it. They don't want to rule us, a Mindari counselor argued. They want freedom to develop on their own terms. If we approach them as equals rather than subjects, we might find them willing to cooperate. War would be catastrophic for both sides. The isolation faction spoke last, their arguments rooted in pragmatism and fear. We cannot defeat them, a Dreth ambassador stated bluntly. The battle proved that. And we cannot control them. 50 years of trying showed us that. So we should stop trying. Draw a line in space and make it clear. You stay on your side, we stay on ours. It's not ideal, but it's survivable. Thane listened to all of it, his centuries of experience telling him that the Council was approaching a critical moment. Whatever decision they made now would shape galactic politics for millennia. Finally, he stood to speak. The chamber quieted out of respect for his age and position. I voted for the human quarantine 50 years ago, Thane began. I believed we were protecting the galaxy from a dangerous species. I was wrong. Murmurs spread through the chamber. For a counselor to admit such a fundamental error was almost unprecedented. We weren't protecting the galaxy from humanity. We were protecting our own position of power. We saw a species that might challenge our authority, and we tried to prevent that challenge before it could begin. That's not, Caxlin started. It is exactly that, Thane cut them off. Be honest with yourselves. The restrictions we placed on humanity, would we accept them if they were placed on us? If another species told the Vexcar they could no longer research new crystal technologies, would you comply? If someone told the Mindari they couldn't explore new telepathic techniques, would you accept that? Silence. We tried to cage a species whose entire history is defined by breaking cages. We tried to control a species whose primary trait is refusing to be controlled. And now we're surprised that they found a way around our restrictions. Thane pulled up images of human history, not the violent parts the Council had focused on, but the other parts. Humans building ships to cross oceans they didn't know existed. Humans launching themselves into space in vessels that sometimes exploded. Humans sending messages to distant stars hoping someone might answer. Look at what humans do when faced with the impossible. They don't accept it. They don't adapt to limitations. They exceed limitations. They make the impossible possible through sheer stubborn determination. So you advocate for negotiation? A counselor asked. I advocate for reality, Thane replied. The reality is that humanity is now a major power whether we like it or not. The reality is that we cannot defeat them without losses that would cripple the Council. The reality is that they've shown restraint when they could have shown destruction. He looked directly at Overseer Caxelin. The question isn't whether we can control humanity. That question was answered at Terra's edge. The question is whether we're wise enough to accept what they've become, and strong enough to change how we relate to them. The debate continued for another day. Arguments were made, scenarios were analyzed, votes were taken and retaken. The Council was fracturing along lines that had not existed before, with species taking sides based on fear, pragmatism, or hope. Finally, Overseer Caxlin called for a final vote. The chamber fell silent as the question was posed. All those in favor of pursuing total war with humanity, signal now. Lights appeared across the chamber. Thane counted them. 14 species. Not enough to carry the vote, but enough to cause problems. All those in favor of isolation and defensive posture. More lights. 19 species. A significant faction, but still not a majority. All those in favor of negotiation and formal diplomatic recognition. The remaining lights appeared. 14 species. Exactly the same as the war faction. Caxlin's crystalline body darkened. We have no majority. The vote is split 3 ways. Thane felt a chill. A split council was dangerous. Without consensus, individual species might act on their own, leading to chaos. Then we must revote, Caxlin said. We cannot remain paralyzed. We must... Every display in the chamber suddenly went dark. Then they lit up again, all showing the same thing. The face of Commander Sarah Chen. Greetings, Galactic Council, she said. I hope you don't mind the interruption, but we've been monitoring your debate. Yes, we can penetrate your security. No, you can't stop us. But that's not why I'm contacting you. The chamber erupted in outrage, but Chen continued speaking. You're trying to decide what to do about humanity. Let me make that decision easier. We're done waiting for you to figure it out. Behind Chen, images appeared. Human ships, thousands of them moving through space. These vessels are currently traveling to Council space. Not to attack, to deliver a message. They should arrive in approximately 6 hours. Caxelin found their voice. What message? Chen smiled. It was not a comforting expression. You'll see. But I'll give you a preview. 50 years ago, you gave us terms for how we could exist in this galaxy. Tomorrow, we're going to give you ours. And this time, we're not asking. We're telling. The transmission ended. Every counselor in the chamber stared at the blank displays, processing what they had just heard. Humanity wasn't coming to negotiate. They were coming to dictate. And the Council, for the first time in its history, had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Thane sat back in his platform, feeling every one of his 4 centuries. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed species make peace and make war. But he had never seen anything like this. In 6 hours, the sky would fall silent again. And when it did, the galaxy would learn what terms humanity had decided upon. Thane could only hope those terms were survivable. 6 hours had seemed like plenty of time. It wasn't. The council chambers descended into chaos as species tried to prepare for whatever humanity was about to do. Some wanted to evacuate their homeworlds. Others wanted to mobilize their remaining fleets. A few simply wanted to surrender preemptively. Ambassador Thane stood at his window watching the stars. Somewhere out there, human ships were traveling toward council space, carrying terms that would reshape galactic civilization. He wondered if those ships were already here, invisible, watching the council scramble in fear. His datapad chimed. Reports were coming in from across council space, all saying the same impossible thing. Human vessels had appeared simultaneously in orbit above every council homeworld, not invasion fleets. Single ships. One vessel per planet positioned in high orbit, shields raised but weapons cold, just sitting there waiting. Thane pulled up the tactical display for his own homeworld. There above the Cathrel capital hung a human ship. It was smaller than the ones at Terra's edge, but no less intimidating. Its hull was dark, almost black and covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. His communicator buzzed. It was his daughter, calling from the surface. Father, there's a ship in our sky. A human ship. What's happening? I don't know yet, Thane admitted. But I don't think we're in danger. Not immediate danger anyway. How can you say that? They could destroy us from up there. If they wanted to destroy us, we'd already be dead. This is a message. They want us to know they could end us, but they're choosing not to. He ended the call and returned to the council chambers. All 47 species were there now, some appearing via hologram because they couldn't or wouldn't leave their homeworlds. Overseer Caxelin stood in the center, their crystalline bodies showing colors Thane had never seen before. Fear and rage mixed together in a way that made the Vexcar leader look like a storm about to break. They've invaded us, Caxelin said. Human ships in our skies demonstrating that they can strike anywhere they choose. This is an act of war, is it? Thane asked. Have they fired a single shot? Made any threats? They're just there. Their presence is the threat. Before anyone could respond, every display in the chamber activated again. Commander Sarah Chen appeared, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives from 3 other species, the Kresh, the Wanderers, and the Silent Ones. The species humanity had allied with. Members of the Galactic Council, Chen began. Thank you for your patience. I know our arrival has caused some concern. Concern? Caxelin's voice cracked like breaking crystal. You've positioned warships above our homeworlds. Yes, Chen acknowledged simply, we have. Because 50 years ago you demonstrated that the Council only understands power. You didn't listen to Ambassador Kovac's words. You didn't care about our desire for autonomy. You only responded when we showed you what we had built in secret. Chen gestured to the representatives behind her. These species understand what it feels like to be ignored by the Council. To be dismissed as too primitive, too small, too insignificant to matter. We found them. We talked to them. We learned from them and they learned from us. And together we've built something new. What do you want? Thane asked, speaking before Caxelin could erupt again. Chen's expression softened slightly. What we've always wanted, Ambassador Thane, respect, freedom, recognition as equals. But we're not just speaking for humanity anymore. We're speaking for everyone who's been told by the Council that they don't get a say in their own future. She pulled up a document, displaying it for all to see. Like the one the Council had given humanity 50 years ago, it was written in multiple languages. But unlike that document, this one was shorter. Much shorter. These are our terms, Chen said. And before you react, I want you to understand something. We're not here to conquer you. We're not here to rule you. We're here to end the system that tried to rule us. Thane read the document carefully. The first term made him smile despite the tension. Dissolve all technological restrictions placed on any species. All civilizations develop freely or none do. The second term was equally straightforward. Establish mutual defense pacts. When any species faces external threats, all who are able shall provide aid. No species stands alone against danger. The third term would be controversial. Create free colonization zones. No species may claim ownership of unoccupied space. The galaxy belongs to everyone. The fourth term was personal. Truth and reconciliation. the Council must acknowledge. Its attempts to stunt humanity's development and commit to never repeating such actions against any species. The final term was the most significant: reform Council governance. All species, regardless of technological level or military power, receive equal votes in Council decisions. The era of the strong ruling the weak ends today. The chamber exploded with reactions. Some species saw opportunity in these terms. Others saw the end of their privileged position. The Vexcar and their allies were particularly upset. "You're demanding we give up everything that makes the Council function," Caxlin shouted. "The restrictions exist for good reasons. The hierarchy exists because some species are more advanced than others. You're asking us to abandon millennia of stability." "I'm asking you to abandon millennia of control," Chen corrected. "The Council wasn't built to help younger species grow. It was built to make sure they only grew in ways you approved of. That ends now. And if we refuse?" Chen's expression hardened. "Then we leave. We take our 300 systems, our allies, our technology, and we go. We'll close our borders. We'll stop all communication. And you'll spend the rest of your civilization's existence wondering where we are and what we're building." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "But here's the difference from last time. Last time you knew roughly where we were. You knew we were in a few systems near your space. This time, we'll disappear completely, and every time you look at the stars you'll wonder, is that sensor ghost a natural phenomenon or a human ship? Is that unexplained energy signature just cosmic radiation or a human research station? Is that missing survey team lost in space, or did they encounter humanity? You'll deploy defensive fleets to every border system, but you won't know which borders to defend. You'll restrict your own expansion, because you won't know if that unclaimed system is really unclaimed, or if it's a human trap. You'll turn inward, grow paranoid, fracture along the same lines we've seen in your debates over the last 2 days." Chen paused, letting that vision sink in. "Or," she continued, her voice softening, "you can accept these terms. You can join us in building something better than the Council, a true galactic community where every species has a voice, where development happens without artificial limits, where the strong protect the weak instead of controlling them." Thane stood again, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. "Commander Chen, may I speak?" "Of course, Ambassador Thane. You've made your point about power. You've demonstrated that you can reach any world in Council space. You've shown us that we cannot stop you. But I have a question. Ask it. Why offer terms at all? With your capabilities, you could simply take what you want. Why give us a choice?" Chen smiled, and this time it was genuine. "Because that's what separates us from the Council, Ambassador. You gave us an ultimatum and expected obedience. We're giving you a choice because we remember what it felt like to have no choice at all." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many counselors as she could. "We could have glassed your homeworlds. We could have wiped out your fleets and emerged as the new dominant power. We have the technology, the weapons, the will, but we also have something the Council seems to have forgotten: the memory of being powerless. Humanity was once divided, conquered, occupied, enslaved by other humans. We know what it feels like to be ruled by those who don't have our interests at heart. We swore after we unified that we would never become the oppressors we once fought against." Thane felt something shift in the chamber. The fear was still there, but now there was something else. Understanding, perhaps. Or hope. "So yes," Chen continued, "we're giving you a choice. Accept these terms and join us in building something new. Or reject them and face isolation. But know that we're not bluffing. The ships above your homeworlds will leave in 24 hours, either as friends or as strangers. The decision is yours." The transmission ended. The chamber fell silent, every species processing what they had just heard. Caxlin broke the silence. "They're threatening us while calling it a choice, are they?" a Mindari counselor asked. "They could be threatening us with destruction. Instead, they're threatening us with loneliness. There's a difference. They want to dismantle everything we've built. They want to dismantle a system that tried to dismantle them," Thane said quietly. "Can we honestly say they're wrong?" The debate that followed was unlike anything in Council history. It wasn't about tactics or power. It was about values, about what kind of galactic community they wanted to be part of. The War faction argued that accepting these terms meant surrender, that the Council would cease to exist in any meaningful way. The Isolation faction pointed out that isolation from humanity might be worse than integration with them. The negotiation faction saw opportunity in the terms, a chance to reshape the council into something better. Thane spoke when the arguments began to circle back on themselves. Let me ask a simple question. Raise your appendage if you believe your species could survive a war with humanity. No one moved. Raise your appendage if you believe isolation from humanity would make your species stronger. A few appendages rose, mostly from the smaller species, but even they looked uncertain. Now raise your appendage if these terms, despite their demands, would actually make your species better off than the current council structure. Slowly, appendages rose. More than Thane expected. Species that had been dominated by the Vexcar and other major powers. Species that had chafed under the technological restrictions. Species that had watched the council's hierarchy and wondered why they deserved less of a voice. Over half the chamber had their appendages raised. Caxlin saw it too. The crystalline overseer's body dimmed with the realization that they had lost. Then it appears we have a decision to make, Caxlin said quietly. Do we vote to accept humanity's terms? The vote was called. It wasn't unanimous. The Vexcar and several allied species voted against acceptance. But the majority voted yes. 31 species out of 47 chose to accept humanity's terms. Thane transmitted the results to Commander Chen himself. Her face appeared on his private communicator. The Council accepts, he said simply. But this is just the beginning, isn't it? The hard work of actually implementing these terms, of changing how 47 species interact with each other, that will take years. Decades probably, Chen agreed. Maybe longer. Change is hard, but it's necessary. Will you help us, or will you just dictate terms and leave us to figure it out? Chen seemed to consider this carefully. We'll help, but not as rulers or teachers. As partners, equals. That's all we ever should have offered you in the first place, Thane said. 2 years later, Thane stood in a very different place than the council chambers. This was the joint station New Horizon, built together by humans and council species as a symbol of their new relationship. Ambassador Elena Kovac, now elderly even by human standards after spending years in cryosleep during her travels, stood beside him at the observation window. They watched as ships from dozens of species docked at the station, bringing representatives to the new Galactic Assembly. We gambled everything, Elena said quietly. 50 years of isolation, forbidden research, building weapons we hoped we'd never use. If you had attacked us sooner before we were ready, then humanity would have fought with whatever you had, Thane finished, and we would have won. But you would have made us remember you forever. Elena smiled. My grandmother used to say that humanity's greatest strength and greatest weakness is the same thing. We don't know when to quit. The galaxy is learning that, Thane observed. He looked at the ships outside. Council vessels and human ships working together now, patrolling, exploring, protecting the outer reaches where real threats lurked. Threats the old council had ignored while focusing on controlling its members. Do you think it will last? Elena asked. This peace we've built? Peace is never permanent, Thane said. But respect can be, fear can be, and humanity has earned both. Not through conquest, but through restraint. You could have destroyed us. You chose to talk to us as equals. That matters. A young human officer approached, saluting Elena. Ambassador, there's a situation developing at the outer rim. Unknown vessels, definitely not from any known species. The joint fleet is mobilizing. Elena and Thane exchanged looks. This was what the new system was built for, facing external threats together instead of fighting among themselves. Tell them we're on our way, Elena said. She turned to Thane. Feel like going on one more adventure, old friend? I thought you'd never ask. They walked together toward the hangar bay where a joint human Cathrel ship waited. The sky might fall silent again soon, but this time it would be because humans and council species stood together, making the silence deafening to those who would threaten them. 50 years ago, the council had tried to cage humanity. Today, humanity and the council flew together as equals, and the galaxy, watching this unprecedented partnership, understood a simple truth. The species that refused to be broken had become the ones others could rely on. The terms had been delivered. The terms had been accepted. Now came the harder work of building a future where no species would ever again face the choice between submission and isolation. In orbit above New Horizon, Both human and council ships patrolled together. Their weapons were ready but pointed outward toward the unknown. Protecting something new, something fragile, something worth fighting for, the sky was no longer silent with threat. It hummed with possibility.